name's Roger Nelsen. I'm a retired math professor at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. As a kid growing up, my father, he'd had a degree in physics and was an engineer by training. And when I would have questions from, my grade school arithmetic class or whatever, and I'd ask him, he'd never answer my questions. He would never answer my questions. He'd ask me a question. And I think this was sort of encouraging me to think a little bit more about the question I just asked. And I mean, he probably knew that, I could learn quickly, this sort of thing. And so, mathematics became kind of a game. I was good at it, so a lot of my friends were better at sports or better at social events, dancing, what have you. But, one thing that I could do and enjoyed doing was, the mathematics. Well, in grade school it was the arithmetic that I was learning, and I could, keep up with the better students in the class. And so when I went to high school, I, enjoyed the math. I had a really good, high school teacher that, got us together to enter the state math contests. And, it was really fun to go down there and come home with, a bronze medal or a silver medal. And I never did get the gold medal, but, it was still a game. When I went off to college, I thought I'd do chemistry. First year of college chem, did away with that. And, I would go down to the math department and discovered I could meet with the math profs, and we could sit around a table like you and I are sitting around this table, and we could talk math, we could talk sports, we could talk weather, what it was. And by the time I was a junior, it was I wanted the job they had. I wanted to go to a small liberal arts college and teach math. And this was I graduated from high school in 1960, and we were involved with Vietnam at the time, and there was a draft. And no, I'm a little mixed up now. I graduated from college in 1964, and it was during Vietnam, and there was a draft, but there was federal money available for people who were interested in teaching math and science to do so because of Sputnik and the fact that we were behind the Soviets in the space race. So, what I really loved to do was going to be financed, through this sort of thing. And, it was difficult at the time of Vietnam because, people I knew that were, being drafted, and I was not doing that. And so was what I was planning to do to teach, sufficient, and this is sort of the thing that, people in sort of my position at that time in history have had to deal with. And I just, the fact that I was able to teach and my students have gone on to do good things, I think it's been a contribution that federal money that helped those of us who were in that program get into teaching. That's a good question. That's a very good question. I have a co-author on that book, Claudio Alsina, who is in Barcelona. He was born and raised in Barcelona. Was a mathematician in the School of Architecture, and I'd been visiting Spain rather regularly and doing some research in the south of Spain. I had colleagues who were doing the kind of research I was interested in Granada and Almeria, but I had met Claudia at a functional equations symposium in 1986, I think, at Mount Holyoke College. And at that time, we discovered we both had an interest in visualization. This is, not what, not like the usual sort of topics that you have at a math meeting or a symposium. But my interest was with the proof without words types of thing. And Claudia was doing the same thing in the Spanish-speaking world. He would, regularly visit, elsewhere in Spain and down to Argentina and other Spanish, speaking countries, and was well known in that area. So At one point, we got together and wrote a book on math made visual, and we did another one on charming proofs. And for us, a charming proof was one that had a visual element to it. And so this led to a number of times that I was able to visit Barcelona, and we'd leave, Cloudy's office, and we'd take walks in Barcelona, and we'd see these very interesting, buildings that this architect Anthony Gaudí had designed. And
Is there one that particularly sticks out to you?
Well, everybody talks about Sagrada Familia, but for me, it's some of the things I saw in the Park Güell, the park that was going to be a sort of a housing development. They only ever built sort of a couple of the homes and the sort of town square. And in the park, there's this beautiful serpentine bench with these mosaics made out of broken pieces of glass and china and this sort of thing. But it's arranged in such a way that there's a mathematical pattern. And so, we would begin to sort of walk around and we would see which sort of mathematical patterns we could see. Another one would be when we went to the roof of the Casa Mila. And when we went into the roof, just under the roof in the attic, there's all these beautiful arches supporting the roof that are in the form of catenaries. In fact, it's one of those, photos that is on the cover of the new book.
Awesome.
So at one point we said, well, we ought to write about this. We ought to, somehow share what we've learned about the mathematics that two mathematicians walking around Barcelona see in the works of Anthony Gaudí. And we, sort of supplement in this book the pictures with what we call math moments to sort of explain the mathematics, a mathematical theorem or problem or inequality that we see. Gaudí probably didn't think about it, but his work as to a mathematician brings it to mind. When I was in college, I was doing mathematics, but I didn't think I would become a mathematician. In fact, I thought I'd study actuarial work in an insurance company. What do actuaries do? Well, they quantify risk, so that you can design a policy that is attractive to the person who wants to buy the policy, but yet it still makes the insurance company money. And that's the balance that actuaries deal with. So I took a couple of the actuarial exams. I passed them. I got a summer job working for an insurance company in Indianapolis, coat and tie every day, going there, working on someone else's problem. And that cured me of wanting to be an actuary. So, what would I have done, if I wasn't going to continue with mathematics? I'm not so sure. Probably the favorite magazine that I read growing up in grade school and high school was the National Geographic. And, my father had a really nice camera, and I sort of had this dream that I could make a living taking pictures. But, it's still a hobby, and I've got a wall, some of the sort of nature pictures that I've taken over the years that are framed on the wall. I'm not sure anybody would buy them. Well, in a sense, I'm glad I don't know, because I really enjoy doing mathematics. I referee a lot of papers now, and every time I referee a paper, I learn something new from that I didn't know. And my job is check out, make sure it's okay, but encourage the author to hey, you're onto something good, and if I have any suggestions to make it more friendly for the reader, here are a couple of ideas. And I enjoy that, but I'm glad it worked out. So. Well, it's been great. It's only the last couple of books that have been done by the AMS. Preceding before those books was done by the MAA, but now they work together on the books, and they've continued the good good relationships that Cloudy and I have had with the MAA, and in fact now we're gone beyond what we were able to do with the MAA. And the most recent book, the one we're talking about, the Genius of Gaudí, is the first book that we've had published that's a little larger format, and with color on nearly every page for both the figures that we drew and the photographs that we needed. So it's been a pleasure, and the people at the staff of both organizations have been very helpful in helping us, share our ideas in print. So yeah, it's been good.